Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Advancement Center and another reading of The Magic of Life, Volume 2, The Next Step by Robert Young. And we're continuing with Chapter 7. Bill slept well, but remembered clearly the alarm in the middle of the night and could not wait for Suzanne to wake to tell her about Willie and the Jeremy. He looked to see if her eyes were open and moved a bit to see if she would stir. There was no reaction. For some minutes, Bill lay with his eyes open, remembering the conversation with Willie and the thoughts he had while sitting in the dark. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie appeared beside him and whispered, "Mummy is pretending. I can see her eyes moving." To Bill's surprise, Suzanne replied without even moving her mouth, "I am not pretending. I am still sleeping." Jamie and Bill looked at one another and smiled as if they both knew what had to come next. Jamie quickly crawled across Bill and into the arms of Suzanne to receive her morning hugs. "Good morning, Bill." "Good morning, Jamie." The bright voice of Suzanne seemed to come from another place and open the day with an angelic presence that ignited the hearts of all the family. Within minutes, they were all in one bed, laughing and chattering like they had been there forever. The cabin was their home, and the ship was a place of adventure. The events of the previous day seemed to fall into the background as they all made plans for the trip and asked questions about what was to come next. The children had it all worked out in their own world of magic and games, and it was unusual to see how Jamie could switch from the outlook of a child to the outlook of an adult and then back again to fit whatever was needed for the conversation. Bill was seriously concerned that he had missed something when he agreed to take on this trip and represent his friends back on the island. After his conversation with Willie the previous night, his mind had taken on so many directions that he needed to talk. Suzanne listened and played with the children, and each time she went to speak, Jamie jumped in with a statement that stunned both Bill and Suzanne and cleared Bill's mind of all the strange logic that had built during the night. Each time this happened, Bill attempted to engage Jamie in the conversation, but found she was still a little girl who had no concern for what was being said. All she wanted was for Bill to make room for her angel friend who had joined them in their bed. With a clear and exciting day ahead, Bill ventured into the dining room to discover that the family had arrived before him. Something had happened that he could not fathom. He had just left them in the cabin getting ready for their planned tour of the ship while he checked with Fred about dining arrangements. Jamie had offered to take them on tour, and Suzanne had accepted graciously with a look of mischief in her eye. He could remember talking to Fred and arranging to meet him in the dining room and had a quick look on deck to see if the fleet was still following before walking directly to the dining room. The children were not even dressed when he left them. How could they get to the dining room before him? A loud welcome came from the table as Bill approached. The frown disappeared and Bill's face lit up in its normal manner. "How did you all get here before me? I only went on deck for a moment. What happened?" Everyone looked at one another with surprise, and Suzanne was the first to respond. "We have been here for 15 minutes, and Fred arrived 10 minutes ago. We thought you were talking to Heinrich, but he just popped in and asked where you were. He will be back in a moment." Fred laughed and said, "Wait for Heinrich. He will tell you all about it. You have discovered the time warp before we could explain." "Time warp!" exclaimed Bill. "You mean that I have been in some strange field that made me lose where I was?" "It's okay, Bill. At least you didn't disappear like other people." "I know. We didn't find them until our return trip. A bit disconcerting, but we have not lost anyone yet." Fred's eyes sparkled as he spoke. He had everyone's attention, but the mischievous smile gave him away. "Telling your tales again, Fred," Heinrich said quietly as he approached the table. The table went into an uproar as everyone realized that Fred and his stories were leading them on, Fred laughed profusely, and the tears ran down his face as he saw the effect he had on everyone who was listening. Okay, Fred, down to business, said Heinrich. Is everyone ordered? Not everyone, replied Fred with a laugh. Bill lost his way. I'm not sure that I understand that, said Heinrich. But come with me, Bill, and we will get the ordering out of the way so we can get down to business. Bill felt a little strange as he followed Heinrich to the galley, and as soon as the order was passed on to the chef, he took the opportunity to speak while he was out of reach of Fred. Fred jokes about what happened to me, but I either lost my mind or time shifted somehow. I left the cabin before everyone had even started to dress, and when I arrived at the dining room, they were all there. Somewhere in between, I lost about a half an hour. How is that possible? Heinrich stopped in his tracks and turned to Bill. Did you go on deck? Yes, said Bill enthusiastically. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, Bill, replied Heinrich. It is probably a good thing that you did. We are entering the transport field a little quicker than I thought, or maybe you are more sensitive than the rest of us. We will see. Come back to the table and I will explain. Bill's heart began to pump, and that familiar feeling that came when a storm was approaching was stronger than he had ever remembered. We are in for a big storm, Heinrich. I can feel it. You are right, Bill, but we have the technology. Sit down and I will explain. Heinrich had been in this situation many times before, and he knew that timing was critical. If he passed on the information he was about to deliver before they were in the area of the transfer field, no one would have a chance of understanding. The field itself gave people the capability of understanding, and very often that understanding was lost when the field receded. Simeon guided Heinrich through the transfer field the first time and gradually delivered technology that could be activated in the field and aid with the transfer. People generally experienced a storm and had no idea about what was actually happening. Bill sat down, and Heinrich held his hands in the air to get the attention of the passengers. One of the ship's staff handed him a microphone. All the cabin and recreation spaces are online, sir. Heinrich nodded, switched the microphone on, and launched straight into a well-practiced announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, within the next 6 hours, we will be entering a part of the ocean which is extremely active. The air itself holds a very strong electric charge, which can be used to speed up our travel. The ship is fitted with specialized equipment that allows the discharge of this electric energy through impulse motors that can take over and drive the ship. You will notice that the lights will go off and the engines will stop to facilitate a power changeover. When the lights come back on, the ship will be running in silent mode under the propulsion of its electric drives. During the short time that we are in the field, it is suggested that you relax and remain within the confines of the accommodation complex. This is a regulation announcement. Don't be surprised if you experience little and forget that it even happened. Thank you. Bill could not wait for Heinrich to sit down, and all eyes were clearly focused on Heinrich with the expectation of hearing more. Please eat, said Heinrich, but no one moved. Heinrich's discomfort was obvious, and he hesitated for a moment before continuing. Bill, do you think that storm is close? Almost on top of us, replied Bill with his eyes fixed on Heinrich to make sure he continued. Good, then. I expect that we are in the safety zone where I can speak freely and not cause a disruption on entry into transfer mode. It feels okay, sir, injected Fred as he settled into his mode of official organizer. Fred was the one who took the Pacific Rose through the transfer when there were no officials on board, and he was very familiar with the required circumstances. We are about to move from the dimension where the island of isles exists to the dimension where the countries of the world exist, Heinrich continued. There is no direct path from the island of isles to the mainland or any other part of the world. Norwich is a part of the regular world that has been transported piece by piece from one dimension to the other and adapted to its new environment to allow people to experience another world. From owls, you can see into the regular world, but from the regular world, you cannot see owls. That is why it is not shown as a location on any map of the world, and why many things work differently for the environment of owls than other parts of the world. Tell us more, said Bill as he watched Jamie finish her last mouthful. I first discovered your island when I was running from authorities who decided that my actions on the stock market indicated that I must have inside information, which is declared to be illegal. For some reason, I knew what was happening with the markets when no other person had any idea, so I became rich and powerful. Fortunately, Simeon appeared to me one night and directed me to a ship that was of questionable origin that had been owned and fitted out by two cousins for the purpose of running contraband in and out of many countries of the world. I commissioned the ship and headed for a distinct location in the southern Pacific Ocean, where I was to stand for 10 hours and await regular instructions. At that time, it was a case of do what you are told or face a very long jail sentence. All I needed was time for all this to go away, but what I got was something very different. How did you discover the island? Suzanne asked. Well, that is a long story, but the first thing is that the location I had to go to and stand by is the exact location that coincides with where we are going now. At a specific time each day, the two coordinates line up, and with a little help, a vortex opens and joins the two dimensions. The action of our radar system is enough to open the vortex and cause an extremely dangerous field that can bend time and hold you in its endless circle until you are released by some external force. Without going into too much detail, you have to know that an external force appeared above me on that night, and the ship with all its crew hovered in the middle of the vortex until what looked like a spaceship engaged its tractor drive and took us into the dimension we are now in. On each occasion, the crew had no memory of anything abnormal apart from the massive lightning storm that seemed to hover around but did little harm. For several months, I worked on the ship and gradually cleared my name, but the action of working with the vortex would never go away. I was led to experience the same movement through the dimensions at least 6 times before I realized that I was running parallel to someone who had obviously been stuck in the vortex. As soon as I looked closely at the other small ship, it attached itself to my field and we both appeared on the ocean just as we are now. The owner of that ship was Edward Olson, and he had the two young men on board who fitted out the ship I had commissioned. Wow, so you knew old Olson, Henry's father, and I bet the two men were Willie and John Boltage. Bill's eyes were so wide open that Suzanne had to calm him down to allow Heinrich to focus. Yes, you are correct, Bill, Heinrich continued. Edward Olson bankrolled the Boltage boys, and they found the Island of Owls, but had no idea that they had gone through a dimensional shift and were experimenting with radar to transpose the dead spots and navigate back to their last recorded position. To this day, they cannot remember what I can remember unless they are in the field, and this is why they have done most of their development work under the protection of the radar blank spots, where they can take advantage of the field that we are in right now. The development of technology over the years has surpassed the need for external assistance in moving through the vortex, but I am aware that Simeon and his team are always on standby when we move between dimensions. The impulse drives and the energy converters were delivered to us, fully assembled and ready to work. This happened after our second assisted voyage on a passenger vessel. We were all amazed, but John Boltage knew exactly what had been delivered and how to install every piece. I'm sure he comes from another planet. Every one of our ships, big and small, have had a special delivery and have been fitted out by John Boltage and his crew. Heinrich paused and listened as if he was waiting for an answer, and then went on. I know you all want to hear more, but I've learned that there is a limit to our capacity that must not be exceeded in any one session. The time of transition is almost with us. You will feel the electricity and then the lights will go out. It is rather exciting. Some people feel the soothing impulse of the drives that operate within the vortex. Enjoy what is happening, and I will recap on the experience once we have transitioned so that it is available to you in both dimensions. Heinrich's features changed and a smile broke off the serious nature of his presentation. Time for that tour, Jamie, he announced suddenly. Fred will go with you to keep you company. Fred nodded with acknowledgement, and everyone at the table started to move once again. Few had eaten their breakfast, and the extra guests had not even met the couple and their children, who had held everyone's attention for the entire morning. The sparkle in the children's eyes and their unique calmness came as no surprise when they looked at Suzanne and Bill. Their total devotion to one another produced a glow that attracted everyone and made it obvious that they had a special place in the life of the ship's master, Heinrich Smithers. After many introductions, Fred moved forward and rescued Suzanne and the children. Bill was in conversation with Heinrich and many of the ship's staff and waved as he saw them gather for their tour that was obviously being led by Jamie. Without a word, both Suzanne and Bill knew that they were heading in different directions. Their communication system was still active, and it switched in immediately to transmit their love to one another. Bill still had some concerns about losing a half an hour of time when he went out on deck and asked Suzanne at a distance what he should do. Her reply was so quick and clear that Bill looked to see if she had come back into the dining room. He looked around and smiled at Suzanne's voice. As Suzanne's voice confirmed, she was in another part of the ship following Jamie's amazingly informed tour of a ship she had never seen before. Bill asked the question again and got the same answer. Go on deck with Heinrich and see what happens. You will be fine. Bill enjoyed these conversations so much that he was surprised when Suzanne signed off saying, must go, the children, love you. Within a second, Heinrich put his hand on Bill's shoulder and with a slight movement of his head indicated that they should go. Bill responded immediately and shook hands with each of the staff gathered around him. Must go, said Bill. Many things to look at before I can catch up with you all. A mixture of agreement and pleasant laughter came as a response from the ship's staff. Bill was obviously accepted and already part of the crew. Heinrich had a clear vision of what he had to show Bill, but before he could proceed, he had to determine how sensitive Bill was to the transfer field and possibly make some changes to compensate. The air on deck was soothing and electric, just as Bill had expected. Heinrich had tested Bill's sensitivity and was sure that everything was okay, but he wanted to see what happened if he left Bill alone for a few minutes. A sense of relief drifted into Bill's field as he was once again on deck of his own fishing boat. Halfway between daydreaming and reality, Bill felt himself turn the wheel and adjust the heading so that the wind was in his face, and then slightly to port to a heading that would take his small fishing vessel home. A touch on his shoulder immediately switched Bill's attention to the Pacific Rose and shook his body violently as he crashed back into place and found himself facing his good friend Heinrich. As I suspected, revealed Heinrich, you are still operating in your old world. Bill shook his head looking for clarity, but nothing happened. Heinrich continued. Look at the fleet. You have turned back all the vessels that are needed to support the island and are leading them away from the Jeremy. Your concern for the island made you take over the helm of your own boat and use your influence to have everyone follow. Immediately there was a flash in front of Bill, and he could see Willie laughing and talking as if he was standing 2 feet away. Okay, Bill, you win. John and I will take the Jeremy through the vortex, and all the other ships will return to support the island. See you on the other side. Bill's body shook again, and after a few blinks of his eyes, everything cleared and started to head back to normal. Heinrich detected what was happening and immediately shook Bill. Don't let the memory go, Bill. See from both sides, and a time slot will open to capture both realities. Concentrate and force time to obey. This is so important. Bill had no idea what Heinrich was talking about, but he heard this is important and conjured up enough energy to bring the full experience into focus. Suddenly, everything became clear, and a linear sequence presented itself as if it had never been any other way. Bill gasped as if it was his first breath, and the clean air filled his lungs, bringing a smile of satisfaction that Heinrich knew to be a clear signal that everything would proceed with the perfection that Simeon had promised. And that's chapter 7. And when I return, I will continue with chapter 8 of The Magic of Life, Volume 2, The Next Step by Robert Young. Wishing you a perfect life, perfect health, and a magic future. Thank you.